You're looking at the nuanced performance of the main character. Again, like Thanos had more on-screen minutes than any other person in that film. And if you compare salaries compared to any other person, I don't know what Josh makes, but I'm just saying, like, you have some of the highest levels of Hollywood in there. And we now, with animation and a bit of CG help and Josh, need to recreate a character that has the same presence, right? Incredibly high. So the last thing you want to do is be in that loop of people doubting your performance.
So, Jan Phillip Cramer, I want to welcome you to Cup of Joe here. I'm going to go through your background. And we work together at Digital Domain, where you're currently the head of animation and a visual effects supervisor.
That's right. So good to see you again, Joe. Thank you for making time for this.
You bet. If I understand correctly, you were born in Germany, maybe Dusseldorf, or something. You were, at least that's your hometown.
Yeah.
But then you went to school at Academy of Art University.
Well, yeah, I as you say, I went to high school in Germany, and so that's when I started dabbling a little bit with 3D and started having the interest. But being in Germany, growing up in Germany, the last thing I thought would happen is that I get to work on a Hollywood film, especially like 30 years ago or 25 years ago. This was a stretch to imagine that this is even a possibility, right? And luckily, I got into the Academy of Art in San Francisco, and I actually moved then completely to America and started studying there. So this was for me quite a big deal. And so I went into a 4-year program at the Academy of Art and studied animation, which was my dream to do and to really follow this through. And so that was my first big intro into the industry, that I got to go there and learn American, like English, to be honest, because I didn't even speak English at the time at all. So it was a very overwhelming experience to switch country and start a sort of a new thing. It was very interesting.
And San Francisco is its own culture. Even in the States, it's its own unique culture, right? Although I can imagine that being a softer landing for coming from Germany than other cities that you might have dropped into. So I'm glad. I'm a Bay Area resident myself, so I'm very familiar with the Academy of Art, very much so.
I loved it because what I felt is the Academy provided us with basically all the tools to be successful, and then it was up to what you do with it. And I think most of the foreign students at the time, I noticed just they were so eager because the thing was so damn expensive, right? To just heads down and work. And so that's what I did. I came to the States and I just worked nonstop for the 4 years to sort of build up my repertoire to get a job in the industry,
That's great. Those Bay Area colleges tend to have a lot of Pixar and ILM, folks too that are teaching. So they tend to have a great set of staff that's filling them up.
Yeah, they had back then, they were called the Pixar classes. I think they still have similar thing where they had teachers from Pixar teach, and you had to apply to Pixar directly to get into the classes. And then there's just 8 to 10 people in there. And all the people that I met at the time in those classes, they're all now in the industry as supervisors, quite important. So it's clearly a great education that they provided with.
Strong program, and you were real successful there. I saw that you were the Distinguished Alumni Award recipient and Emerging Artist Award, and you graduated cum laude. So it sounds like you are, in fact, a really hard worker.
I got lucky, thank you.
And you decided you didn't go to one of those Bay Area studios. After that, I believe you went to Sony Pictures straight out of school. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's right. But it's not like I decided as much as that was the option I got, which was a great option. And I think it's pretty much when I graduated, I applied to every studio you could think of. And that was my goal. I always tell people, like, do it like machine gun style. Like, you don't even know what you're shooting at. It's hopefully something sticks. And so I applied to so many places that I remember already working at ImageWorks, I would still get rejection letters from all the companies that didn't care for me. Anyway, so I applied everywhere, and ImageWorks, they were interested in me. And so I took it right away, and it was my dream, to be honest, to work there. I couldn't comprehend that. I achieved that on my first job. And anyway, so that opened the doors. But you mentioned earlier Pixar and all that stuff. So obviously, going to the Academy of Art, I was thinking I would deal with more animation, slipping on a banana peel, cartoony animation. This is what I trained. And the first job I got was Ghost Rider, which is like not that at all. I think the first shot I animated was this guy had an eye popping out of his eye socket. And I was like thinking, like, how did that happen? You know, but sometimes in life, you have these moments where you make a decision and that changes everything for you. And for me, it was first, I study in America. That changes everything more than I ever thought. And then this was similar. Me starting at Sony set me on the visual effects track. And I got good at that. And then you focus on that and you get interested in that. But at the same time, I drifted away from the, you know, the cartoony track more, the better I got in this. So now I don't think I will go back. So.
Well, you talk about some of those surprising, you know, left turns and right turns and advantageous sort of opportunities you had. Well, the very next place you went after doing Ghost Rider and Spider-Man 3 was Weta to work on Avatar. So that's a very extreme shift, and continued your tour around the world, obviously. But that must have been still. I mean, you're still almost a junior by the numbers, and here you are working on what ends up being the biggest movie of the time when it came out. What was the and then you also went on there just to work on A-Team and Predators there at Weta. What was Weta like?
I got to work with a guy called Andy Jones, and he won the Oscar for Avatar and for Jungle Book and Lion King, and he interviewed me to get the job at Sony, but I never got to work with him directly much. And over my time at Sony, but I knew I had heard through the grapevine that he was at the time a supervisor at Sony, that he would go and be the anime director on Avatar. Little did I know what that is, but I was able to follow him. And for me, that was, even though at Sony things were looking up for me, I chose to do something crazy and just go far away, like as you say, complete the round trip. And for me, it was just, I was eager to work on the biggest thing. Yeah, whatever it could be. And they had just done King Kong, which is like as great as it gets. And I wanted to be part of the next thing that's even bigger. But the problem was Avatar has very little impact at the time. When anybody tells you, like, you're always like, The Last Airbender? No, not that. I think it's a different one from Cameron. I thought he went into retirement. Didn't he do Titanic 10 years ago? Anyway, so that was sort of the setup, you know, going to Weta, meaning like this is either going to be the biggest thing ever or not so much, you know. And so we went, and my wife, now wife back then, and my partner, my girlfriend, we decided, like, well, let's just go. And going to New Zealand for me was just a beautiful experience. And I tell people, like, it's something great to experience on the way on your career, I feel, because it might not be forever. But at the time I went, I was 27. As you said, I had no rights to, you know, really to go there. And so I was one of the most junior animators when I started there. And it was just exciting to be in New Zealand. And Weta is very similar in my eyes to Digital Domain, which is, well, you know, I'm working now, where you basically, it has a bit more garage band mentality. Like, you bang the stuff together, you come up with, because it's the leading edge. So it's expected that, you know, it's rough around the edges, but you deal with it, you know, and absolutely love that approach. You know, Sony, I love that too, but they are more set up for like thousands of shots, you know, where you just push stuff and you build a machine, and they have a well-oiled pipeline, right? And, but that pipeline requires you to not touch it. Like, it's basically, they have their TDs that deal with all the things that don't work. Well, at Weta, it's sort of like, the more you know, the better you're going to be. And it's similar at DD, sort of like, you need to know where the dead birds the dead bodies are buried to figure out how to do the bestest work there. And again, my mentality was, starting at Weta, this is not a good mentality for anybody, but I thought, like, I'm sitting amongst the best animators in the world, right? And I'm not one of them yet, and I have to become that. And so my thought was simply, I will work twice as much as everybody else, and like that, I will just catch up by time, not by talent, you know? And that's what I did the first year. I was for 3 years on Avatar. The first year I came in, this is horrible to talk about, but I came in every Saturday and Sunday. At first, my wife wouldn't be there for the first 6 months, and she let me at the time. So it would be my goal that always on Fridays, and they never figured it out. It would just be on Mondays. Phyllis Annum looks genius, and like I would like finish entire shots like from Friday night, getting it assigned Monday morning, I'm done, you know. But that was kind of my way. And guess what? After doing that for a year, I started getting faster and faster and faster. And I had to do less and less and less of that OT to be competitive, And so that is not the best way to get there, but I got there that way. And same at Sony, to be honest. And then, but again, like it's something, it's tricky, right? Like you don't want to encourage anybody to do it. So when I talk about these things, I'm always very, like this is something not super good and healthy all the time. And I did it because like I loved every second of it. I wanted to be there. So I would go in, I would put on a audiobook 12 hours long, and I leave the day when that thing is done.
I think a take-home lesson there, though, could be that, although it's not necessarily advisable to go kids work for free, don't necessarily do, on the weekends and do that. But one thing I think that what you were doing, and you achieved it through this way, there's different ways to achieve it, is simply logging the hours, right? Like it's sort of like being a really good pilot and having the flight hours. Like you've got to have those animation hours. And so whether you're working on side projects, personal projects, collaborative projects that are just for fun outside, that idea that the folks I know who are most successful in industry seem to be those who work on it impassionately. They're simply much like a gymnast or anyone else. They're going to spend all their waking hours sort of devoted to this to become to get to that level. That's just how you do it. It's how you get in the Olympics. You don't do it for a couple hours a day, a few days a week. You got to go. And I think you demonstrated that. Now, whether you channel that through work, whether you channel it through personal projects, simply logging the hours seems to be one of the ways you are able to accelerate this growth pattern.
But you said it dead right, I think, because I did it for myself, not for the company. I didn't do it for a supervisor. I did it for myself because I wanted to become one of these people that I admired, right? And over the years then, like at Weta, they promoted me to become a lead on Avatar and Avatar was a huge show. So I got much more exposure into outside of animation all of a sudden. I would sit in dailies with some of the biggest visual effects supervisors in the world, and it was really great experience. I look at it like when Avatar came out, there was this experience of like, and I have a poster, I wish it would be right here, but it's like from one of the other leads, they made a poster and it said like something like, last year, what the blue space aliens, this year, biggest movie in the world. And it was like that. The movie was shown, the trailer came out, right? Like 2 months, 3 months before movie release. We had worked for 3.5 years on that thing or something, 3 years. And people were like, huh. So that was it. And because it came from James Cameron walking around telling everybody, and sorry for the language, he said verbatim, like, I'm going to your eyeballs. And that kind of a hype did just lead to a very flat reaction that people were like, oh, it looks pretty CG to me. And then people moved on from it. And we were all like,
looking back, sometimes movies aren't necessarily appreciated the week they hit the box office in the full.
No, exactly. And I tell you one thing about it, like seeing the movie come out and then it started slow and then it went big. And for me, it was my third film I had worked on at the time. And it becomes the biggest film of all time. This was incredible, that the feeling that gives, even though we work on every show just the same, you put the same effort into it. When you have that moment and like all of a sudden you realize what you worked on is the only thing the whole world is watching and talking about is unreal. And I went to see Avatar, I think 10 times. Like this is rare. I normally don't watch movies I work on so much. And it was just the experience in the theater. You would see like old people, like two old grandpas together, and it looked like the last movie they watched together was Star Wars. So what happened at Weta is at the end, I got promoted to become a Supe after Avatar. And then that opened the doors. Avatar opened all the doors. And I reunited with one of the Supes that I worked with very closely, Steven Rosenbaum, on Avatar. I got to start with him at DD together. And and ever since I've been there, and DD gave me so many amazing opportunities, right? I started there as an anim director, which for me was a great opportunity and challenge, right? And I did many films over the years. And again, DD is the kind of company I feel like that puts a lot more onto the leadership in terms of the creativity, how you drive your boat, which is great. And I really enjoy it so much, both in animation, from first becoming animation director, then I moved to become head of animation. kind of out of, back then I felt out of necessity. Head of animation didn't even exist so much at the time. In other studios, we just felt, or I felt, I had built up like a lot of the anim team on the first 2 movies I did, and a lot of people left. And for me, it was a really frustrating experience. I had spent like 3 years building a team where I did all the shows, and I'm very trying to, like, I always make sure that the artist goes first, that I try, like, the happy artist makes a great product. That's my whole philosophy, and I got that from Andy Jones back then. It's like, you gotta, if you invest in that, they will fight for you and work so hard to make the best art that you want, like, with you. Then if you rule by fear, which is, I guess, the other way, that you try to get the most out of the people there. And that is not working at all, because that works for 1 movie. And then you gotta find a new crew. So anyway, and I wanted to make sure that we keep the people and provide them a longer lasting career perspective and stuff. And so that's, I at the time told DD, like, I think I should be head of animation. At the time it was department supervisor, and they agreed at the time. And so I then was able to build this and form a department and work out, like, what does make sense for a department, and how does that best be run, and especially at a company like DD, where it lost a lot, went from movie to movie to movie, rather than what is best for each department.
It can be very difficult in a lot of the studios to maintain departmental cohesion. It's so show based. People are coming in and out that you sort of have to fight the entropy that naturally kicks in as people are leaving, coming and going, and you have to create sort of a scaffolding for everyone to hang on to create a department. And it's not always done at studios for the artist level. In other words, there'll be shows that are very team oriented and they're wonderful for the life of the show, but it goes away when that show ends, and it's very hard to keep departmental inertia through all these different projects. And that's something that I saw you do very well at DD, and it stood out to me. In fact, it was one of the reasons I wanted to have this conversation, was to talk further about that. But now that you've gone from Avatar to DD, and there your list of movies grew quite long that you've worked on and worked with. At DD, you started working on movies like Ender's Game, X-Men Days of Future Past, Night at the Museum, and we share a credit on that one. Pixels, Deadpool, Independence Day. You worked on Spider-Man Homecoming, so you went back to Spider-Man. That's awesome. And then, of course, there you go. And both Avengers movies, including Endgame, which then overtook Avatar, if I have my numbers correct, as the most successful movie ever. Again, I'm seeing a trend here. Cops and Robbers. That's definitely a different take, and I think 2020 caused a lot of people to sort of pivot a little bit in what they think about, what they work on. Can you tell us a little bit about what Cops and Robbers is? And I'll put a link in here to the...
Cops and Robbers was a beautiful project at the beginning of when the pandemic started, really. I think we all went into lockdown and had little hope what's happening in the world. And on top of this, there was like massive the racial tension in America overboiling to the point of, from the outside, I'm not American, seeing what happens is beyond comprehension, right? And I think most artists around the world see that and get really emotional about these sort of things, and we want to help and we want to bring equality to people. Anyway, it was a rough time, and Anon Mano and Timothy Ware. Anon Mano is a VP from Sony, and Timothy Ware is a actor and poet and video artist. He does beautiful work. He made a poem about expressing his frustration about what's happening and seeking for change. And Anon picked this up, and he saw it, and he wanted to make a project out of this. And it's a for-profit, non-profit. It's a non-profit project where all the different artists around the world that he contacted. There's, I think, over 50 artists that were participating, and companies. So DD as a company participated, and I helped there. And in addition, multiple schools. I work with a lot of schools over my years, teaching and advising schools. I try to pull them in and have little teams working on different snippets of it. And so it's now out on Netflix. It's a 5-minute piece that is of Timothy Ware running through a neighborhood and just talking about his frustration. But while the video is playing, always 5 to 10 second bits have been animated or replaced by visual effects artists. It's produced by the wife from Will Smith.
Is that Jada Pinkett Smith? You mean?
Yeah, Jada Pinkett Smith. Exactly. I wanted
Jada
to
Pinkett Smith. And I imagine you probably included, you're on the advisory board at the Langara College, I think. So you probably, one of the schools involved was Langara, I imagine?
Yeah, Langara was one of them because they're also local in Vancouver. So this was a very good fit, right? And I think there were very strong entries. The other one was the Film Academy in Germany, which is, I think, one of the best schools in Europe for animation and visual effects. And they had multiple entries running. And then the last school was a school that I had given a talk in Canada, in Manitoba. It's in Winnipeg. The school is called Sizzler High, and it's such an inspiring school. I went there like a year and a half ago to give a talk about Endgame, and I left with more than I arrived. It's something, because it's a high school. You think like high school visual effects, but the effort they put into this is unreal. And the kids, they did such a beautiful job on that project. I mean, I was so proud of them, seeing that that's possible. And they're like young kids. I went out there to show them Thanos back in the day. And it's just the enthusiasm. And I arrived there and they were like, kids had already modeled Thanos to show me. And it's just, I couldn't comprehend the level of ability they were having. And they constantly do little projects for Nickelodeon, for different full productions, you know. And so it's very impressive.
That's fantastic. Yeah. So now I'm thinking back to what you said earlier, and I'd heard you say in another interview that, you know, you grew up in Germany and it's impossible to think about working in Hollywood if you haven't been there. And you've now been there, you know, Sony's down there. You've like literally been in Hollywood, and you're now a member of the Academy, I believe. And you're definitely a member of the VES. And you've got a VES award in 2018. You worked on 2 of the most successful movies in film history, which Avatar and Avengers Endgame. I know you wanted success in Hollywood and such, but when you look at this level of success at this point, how does that make you feel? What kind of thoughts come to mind when you think about this in contrast of, wow, that'd be cool to go to Hollywood and here you are, you know, leaving the VES awards and things like that.
I mean, like crazy, right? I mean, to me, completely overwhelming. And I'm a very emotional person. I don't know if you see, but often when I talk about more emotional things, I tear up without having control over it. And so for me, this was obviously super emotional. Like working on Avatar and then 10 years later to beat your own success is, and then I was in charge of that project versus on Avatar was the lead, which was for me incredible. And similar, I think is the becoming a member of the Academy is, I could not comprehend. I didn't even know that except foreigners back then, you know, so when I became member, that's sort of when my whole world collapsed and I just started crying like a baby and curled up because I reached sort of all the goals I had set out. This was just after Spider-Man and became member of the Academy. And then, yeah, working on Endgame is just beyond comprehension. And because we're working in front of teams, you know, we have these so many people, so many aspects lead into you working on the film being good. The effort is all the same. Like I worked from some of the least successful to the most successful. My effort is the same. My sleepless nights are the same. It's just the reward is very different when you talk to your friends about it. So this was amazing. And then, I mean, winning for Thanos, the VES award that was my ultimate goal when I went into the industry. I wanted to make the greatest character at one point. And we, at the time, we were able to make, I think, the best character. And again, these things happen out of a lot of luck, the right moment, and yeah, you got to bring a little bit of talent, but that's not what it is. It's all the other things in the ball, and then you might be lucky there, you know, in that moment.
Avengers.
And I saw it because, like, look, the next year, so we won the VES award for Thanos, but and come next year, right, we have Thanos improved and we're not getting nominated. So you see how competitive it is to just be nominated. Forget about winning. That's just winning is just a piece of luck because it's depends on the constellation of which companies, how many votes. I'm just saying it gets political.
Well, Thanos was of the two projects that you worked on when I was there. Watching Thanos come to life, and before that, watching Colossus come to life.
Yes.
We're both just I remember you folks having to talk about doing it, and me, of course, not even being a visual effects artist, just not even comprehending how you're going to pull this off, and then immediately seeing the tests. I mean, really, not to give it away that it was that easy, but and it wasn't. But like Colossus was looking good really early on. Thanos was looking good really early on. You guys did a lot of tweaking, but the wow factor was achieved early. Those two, I think, when I think back to Digital Domain, the two wow moments I had the most were Colossus and Thanos alone. So
it's what is interesting about that though is that you're saying the wow moment was early, and I think there's a lot to that. That the more the wow moment is early, the better for the show, because you want to establish something that people generally feel good about without knowing the show. On Thanos, we had the opportunity, and on Colossus, now you say it, because on Colossus we did a smaller piece, but a dialogue bit that wasn't released, and on Thanos we did like a larger piece that is on YouTube that people can watch. And both times it was before they even went really to shoot a lot or we were delivering shots at all. They were able to see their character in all its nuance. And I think it's critical because like when you like your character, the more you like your character, the better it's going to be. Like on Thanos, I remember Kelly Port, the VFX suit from Infinity War and Endgame, he went out to showed our test to Josh Brolin on the first day of the shoot. And like he saw it, and for him it was like a actual reaction to, oh, okay, I don't have to overact. You guys capture everything I do. And it changed his approach to the character, right? And that's why I think it's so important that you, he thought he would have to be like, I'm a villain. Because you kind of think you need to be big so it comes through because of that technology. But because the test with Thanos, we did a lot of just random conversations between the directors and Josh. And so we use that then to create also the character, because Josh, I think, is the character. Obviously, he acts and changes the nuances, but his acting is Thanos, and it's not like the character that drives it and he gives a voice piece. No, it's him.
Yeah, there's a lot of subtlety to his movements, and really Digital Domain and and your animation team with Doug Roble doing a lot of the R&D on the background, a lot of these tools. I mean, Digital Domain really has just pushed the envelope with everything involving animation and facial capture, and so and of course then it's handed over to your team to go and finesse, and so again early on I was seeing all that, and really also technology really, as much as talent is key, and Digital Domain has a lot of it. A lot of the secret sauce sometimes is the technology behind it too. It's having the tools to do the job. And so whether you look at what Digital Domain's done for years now with creating faces and digital characters and capturing them, and then you move on to like what you guys do. I've heard you talk publicly about AnimViz and this whole idea of getting things out early. The more you can get, and this goes back to what you just said, the more you can get creative eyes on product early in the stage, the more they can make educated guesses about or educated requests about what they want to see, because now they're seeing the product. I know what you guys did with GPU and Redshift and all that. Again, and it's really great the way you're able to get animation looking good and in front of the client's eye early in the stage. Now, people don't understand most of the time, and back in the day, animation would be presented to the director and to other visual effects supervisors, and it would be passed upstream in very raw forms, right?
So AnimViz is a process that we sort of developed out of necessity, and it's something I have to admit that is the reason why I'm now VFXing, because I started just realizing that animation that I present was non-representative to a point that it hurt the company's baseline while working, because we had a tendency to produce anim that looks good but doesn't represent the look of the shot. So what happens is the client sees it, likes the animation, and then they see it rendered and they're like, well, she's cross-eyed. or, and at that point we would have to go back to animation, now try it, and then go through that loop a bunch of times. And this happened a lot, on action sequences due to lack of motion blur, and especially close-up facial, because you're looking at the nuanced performance of a main character. Again, like Thanos had more on-screen minutes than any other person in that film. And if you compare salaries compared to any other person, I don't know what Josh makes, but I'm just saying, like, you have some of the highest levels of Hollywood in there. And we now, with animation and a bit of CG help, and Josh, need to recreate a character that has the same presence, right? Incredibly high. So the last thing you want to do is be in that loop of people doubting your performance. So what we did is we started looking at, okay, how can we recreate the full pipeline in small in animation? So to use the HDRs that we use later, use the roto that we use later, the enviro, everything that we use later, now in blocking already. And you might think like, well, that's expensive and crazy. Not really. If you plan different, you can get a lot of that stuff earlier. And you get a lot of feedback on even creative things like effects. So for instance, Vision's head exploding. Sorry, I'm giving away there a little bit. That's a couple of years ago. Some people hopefully watch it. So his head explodes. And the question is, how chunky should the explosion be, right? This is a good question probably. Is it pulverized to big chunks? And so the best way you ask that is by showing that, And so showing a rough effects pass to Marvel is not going to go down well. It's better to show it in context, right? That they know what it is. But showing it via anim blocking is the best anim blocking they have ever seen. And so that's how we started working. We're just like, okay, let me take that. And I just show it much sooner. And all of a sudden the anim blocking would get like flyaway comments like, oh yeah, and it's too chunky. Or like, oh, not red enough. Or, hey, we don't like this about that. The enviro looks too small. Like you get the feedback that you normally get when you submit the first version on a comp. But we get it out of animation. And that's priceless, right? Because so now I make better decision here. So does our internal team and the external team and the directors and everybody all of a sudden. And so they didn't know what it is. Marvel initially started giving us a lot of lighting notes. So we had to submit the same stuff in gray to avoid confusion. But I love getting lighting notes on animation because you're like, check next, because they're thinking now about the problem, which is the performance. They're not thinking about like other things, because it's the same, like if you don't have depth of field, everybody behind me is in focus and gets equally criticized.
Yep.
You might not see anybody there.
So AnimViz, to restate it, basically puts together a comp, right? It puts together sort of a slap comp, but sort of an automated comp that allows the end user to see, the client to see at least a general sense of the blocking and not just the animation of the character by itself.
Yeah, thank you. That's a great overview. Exactly that. So we're doing a GPU render of animation that then gets comped with whatever is available from downstream departments. And so we try to get it as quickly back into a proper shape that looks like the post-vis. And this is really where a lot of this came from, is we have pre-vis looking pretty good, post-vis looking really good now. And anim, in my eye, hasn't really moved on. Like Viewport 2.0 isn't really looking that hot, and so the tools haven't gone there. And so the director comes from playing PlayStation 5 to review the $200,000 shot or whatever. I mean, just saying like the super expensive thing, and it's like looks pretty much like Nintendo 64. And that's where I wanted to come in to sort of make it look more advanced. And yeah.
I think there's two lessons there too, and that one is the power and the necessity, and this isn't just in this category, but this happens throughout pipelines, and people don't get it till they're in the business, of how much all the people working on various aspects need to constantly be updated and sent downstream so people have the latest, greatest, and this is part of that process. And then the other take home is that there's a little secret term on the bidding side that maybe the studios don't always hear about, but the client sides will have a term called a fourth quarter studio. And a fourth quarter studio, I don't know if you've heard this term, Phil, but fourth quarter studio is a studio that doesn't really present to the client what it's going to look like till the fourth quarter of the football game. It's like they sort of can't. And so when they go through and they're judging, it's not just about the bid, numbers, right? It's about the previous history of work and how much can they start delivering early on. So I think that gives you guys a great edge. And this is to anyone out there who, the more you can show early on what this is going to look like, the more the client's going to look at you as is going to look at you as a fourth quarter studio. And you don't want to be one of those. And Digital Domain is certainly not. So this is one of those. That's all right. It's all good. We like a little interruption. Often it's dog barks or kids. That's the new world. That's actually a great segue. So work from home. You guys are all working from home now. So there's a lot of challenges and a lot of it's been rehashed already in a lot of conversations, interviews. But do you have any kind of tricks that you've done with your team, being so team oriented, to kind of help keep the team together when everyone's apart? What have you done?
It's challenging. Everything is more challenging, but also gets easier. So I think there's opportunities in this. So first off, I feel since we're all switching to use Zoom or similar things, I think actually the review efficiency went up by tenfold, right? It's much easier to communicate with anybody, no matter where they are. Meaning our Montreal artists, I talk to them exactly the same as our LA artists, which I love.
It leveled the playing field, so to speak. So you're dealing with everyone the same way.
And on top of it, group dailies used to be a bit more of a luxury that we can't always do. When the teams are too large and the review times are forever, right? Like normally on a big show, we review from morning to end of day. So you can't do it with everybody. You just do it with like a smaller 2 or 3 people at a time max, right? Here, all of a sudden, people can listen in, just join the Zoom call. They don't have to watch. They can still work. Same with meetings, right? You have a big meeting, everybody keeps working. You don't waste everybody's time. So that's great. What worries me a lot is because in visual effects, there is also a lot of very tech-oriented people that aren't very outgoing, right? That just is part of the industry. And what I want to make sure is that these people don't end up falling through the cracks in the meeting because they're like people that are shy, like you and I, we would turn the camera on and laugh and aloud. But there's a lot of people in my team where I noticed like they don't like to share their camera for whatever reason, right? And I generally encourage them, but there is like a point where you don't want to force people, So anyway, and they can get lost in meetings that their opinion isn't as heard. And I think that's really important to realize that they're not, it's not like they're less important because they speak less, And that's really, I think, on all the supervisors to get a sense of that and to encourage people to talk up more. Now, so we're using, besides Zoom, we're using GChat a lot, which is because at DD, we're using Google, so this is kind of our normal way of talking. But we started giving animators an outside track with this Discord, and it's less supervised by the leadership, and it's meant to be more for people to just talk about stuff. So we have like anim chats and show-related chats where people are focused on just the work, but then we provide a lot of like outside of chats. So just that people are still staying in touch, reaching out to one another. We're also doing something called beer o'clock that we used to always do, but now we're doing it virtual, where we're all just drinking together virtually. And oddly enough, that does a lot. To me, that brings the most out of people, not the drinking part, but just like just hanging out on Zoom and everybody pops in and out and it's very relaxed. And people
we do that as well. We do that as well, posting links and finding things like that and sharing screens and things like that. And
it's important, right? Like, because I feel like that's the one aspect we have to be so careful of, that people don't like get lost there. It's also, to me, it's like people, they need a break from work. I have that myself. Like, you leave your office and you're right at home, and it's tough, right? Like, you have to sort of find a way to turn off and then continue. And so I have a lot of people that I know that are struggling a little bit with sleep, with different things, just because life is different right now, right? With always being on lockdown, and especially I keep telling my coordinators, there might be some people that were the main person they talked to today, right? So like my 5 minutes on Zoom with this artist might be much more important, and I have to constantly remind myself to not skip over anybody, because you don't know who they're talking to all day, when they're in lockdown.
Well, you had said earlier that now that Zoom sessions sort of leveled the playing field amongst your local staff and your remote staff, because there was always sort of a weight that leaned towards your local staff. It was just easier to interact with them. I always found that working in multinational companies, right? That's a natural thing, and that's leveled. So I guess we do have to find that same sort of leveling mechanism for the folks who are more introverted, who don't want to put up their photos or their videos. I find the chat aspect of Zoom sessions is where you can encourage them. Then, then type your comments. It's okay. Some people really would rather type than talk. Then that's okay, and you can trigger different synapses by doing a written conversation versus a spoken one. So I'm not against that, but you've always had clearly a strong, like I said earlier, a strong focus on your team. You've built a lot of leadership in your group and focused on creating leaders. And I think they've all inherited a lot of your style, which I think is a good thing for the record. And what is your feelings about that? I mean, what's driving you to, I don't see this through all the departments and all the studios.
I work from within. And so all my Supes sort of have replaced me now from within, and I'm happy with that because I see they're working great and they're working fantastic on their own. And they run their own shows without any problem. I mean, those are things that I didn't imagine happening 5-6 years ago, when we were building and trying to get bigger shows and get more exciting animation work. And now it's to the point where, I'm sort of stepped back a little bit and focusing on larger picture things, which for me is fantastic. And anyway, it makes me really proud seeing them grow.
Nice. I always, I prided myself on caring about the livelihood of my employees, not just their work. And I think, it's not, their livelihoods. Like I knew that as a manager, you could influence both positively and negatively these folks. And I think that's something that you take to heart, where that, the people you're dealing with, it's not just about a shot. It's not just about a piece of work. It's about dealing with a human being. And that's sometimes forgotten. And I think that's something that I felt you harnessed quite a bit, that focus on the human being part, whether it was your team or just other parts of my render wranglers, didn't really matter. You really kind of accessed the human side of interacting with people. And I think that's important. And I think some people are just challenged by it in the artist community too, right? They're introspective. They're thinking about themselves. They're artistic, and you sort of turn that outward, and it's really nice to see. So it was really a pleasure working with you.
No, I appreciate it because it's same right back to you because look what you're doing right now. You're helping people, get in the industry, get a better understanding of that. And that same, because when you were at DD, I remember we did a class sort of like this where we talked to your crew about what it takes to move up and what sort of things to learn for them to find their next step. And I think this is what really life is all about. And to me, when I became member of the Academy, I realized it's time to sort of give back and try to show what I learned and give that to other people as tools to sort of achieve their dreams, because you need a helping hand. And I certainly got a helping hand on the way up too by people that were really kind and nice on the way and give their advice.
And hopefully, and I don't know about you, but I take pleasure when people can stand on the shoulders of what I've learned or done and then go on to sort of next level thought, next level achievements where it's like, I wasn't even going there, but wow, you've taken it to a whole new level. So I always love it when folks can kind of I can help be a springboard for folks with whatever direction they want to go in, art, whether it's business or art. It is always I take pleasure in helping people, and I think you did too. You've been around the globe now. You wanted to enter Hollywood, and then you got to Hollywood, and then you traveled the world, and now Hollywood's worldwide. Hollywood's not Hollywood anymore, right? It's a state of mind. It's big in Europe now, growth in Germany, growth in England. Have you ever thought about returning to Germany, or are you kind of a Vancouver right now? What's your thoughts on that?
Well, my mom is going to watch this, so I always wanted to return back to Germany, but when I studied, I found my wife and married her, and she's from Mexico. So we went with this, she's Mexican American, so we always thought we're not going to move to Mexico and probably not to Germany. So we somewhere in between. And so New Zealand, not quite in between, but Canada is something we now really, really love. And my kids are both growing up here, so it's a beautiful place. But in this industry, you never know where it takes you next. But Vancouver it is for now.
Yeah, I feel the same way. I have no desire to leave. I could stay here forever and be very, very happy. But I do know that it is a migratory world. And, I would have never imagined 7 years ago that I'd be living up here. And I certainly wouldn't have imagined that the borders would be shut down for a year. So, you go with the flow. And Phil, I think you've always gone with the flow in a great way. Again, it was a real pleasure working with you. And this interview reminded me of what it's a pleasure like to just hang out with you. So I appreciate your time here, and gosh, I wish you guys the best of luck. I watch, Dee Dee. I say this to Lala, who's now head of studio, frequently when in a side email. My wife and I have known her since the 90s when she was at ILM as a recruiter. And I always say, that, we're family. We're Dee Dee family, after Florida, after everything, like we're family. It doesn't matter where I work. I'm always Dee Dee family. And if you ever get a chance to work at Digital Domain, the artist community there is really treated like artists and not like cogs in a wheel. Not to say that's okay too. You can go corporate, you can go big, but if you want to kind of go with that, we're all in this together, sort of like a rugby scrum to get that ball where it needs to get. I strongly recommend DD, man. It's an awesome place to work, and you'll grow if you go there. So hopefully you work for Phil. So thanks a lot, Phil. I appreciate it, buddy.
Thanks so much. Yeah. Awesome.